It is 6:45. I will open the public hearing on the village noise law. Please stand for the pledge. Flag is over here. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The public hearing on the noise law is now open for any comments.
Okay, I'll make that comment.
Dave?
I'm just looking at the times here, I just picked this up and look at it. I see the hours delineated, beginning at 9 p.m. Sunday to Thursday, 10 p.m. Friday and Saturday. I don't, I'm not reading this correctly, or I don't see like an end time, when the time has to end, or all of it can go all night. I don't understand.
Can't go all night.
Well, yeah, but there's not
much
anything.
What do you mean? Is that the end?
Well, it says you can make.
What section you're on? You're in section 133?
Yeah,
Yeah. Daytime hours are 7 to 9,
yeah.
and then 7 to 10 on Friday and Saturday, or 7 to
So
10.
in other words, outside those hours,
It's nighttime hours,
yeah, nighttime hours is defined as,
50 decibels,
and the times are?
from 9 to 7. It's the opposite. Those are just examples at the bottom where it says daytime hours. It's right up here. It says, I know it's a little complicated because some days will start Monday to Friday, daytime starts at 7 a.m.
Yeah.
And before 7 a.m. is nighttime. And then nighttime begins at,
Before 7 a.m. is nighttime.
Yes,
yeah.
for purposes of
The alternate
law.
here.
Okay.
What's weird is, and what would have gotten along is those, for example, daytime, the nighttime would actually go from one day to the next morning, the next
Yeah.
day. It would sound complicated.
Right.
So these are examples at the bottom.
Well, I'm just making sure.
Yeah,
I
for sure.
see where it comes like midnight.
No, nighttime hours always begin at 9 or 10. And that falls under the 50 decibel rule.
One other comment I have,
Yeah.
and I was one of the first people to support music at the mill. The issue I've had previously, and up until that point anyway, was it wasn't the actual loudness of the music at times, it was continuous thumping. That close your door, air conditioner on, TV, I can still hear thump, thump, thump. That, I don't know how that's addressed, or if it's addressed, but that to me is part of, is part of the big issue.
And where are you located? How close is it?
I'm located, let's say, across from Griffin's Ridge, across the street, the other side of Route 9. Diagonally.
You're on the same side as the...
Yeah, there's one
the road
property
that goes up.
between
Yeah.
us and the lake.
All right.
So,
So we did a lot of testing across from at Griffin's Ridge and across from the field.
No,
Yeah,
I understand.
Yeah, you're-
But when,
we didn't really test for the low frequency
I know.
vibration.
There is code on that.
There is code on that, and I was just looking for that.
It's in a
I'm
separate
not even
section,
sure
I
how
believe, of the ordinance.
that's the low frequency
Yeah.
vibration.
Yeah,
and
there is
they
another
permeate,
section
like
of the-
same principle, the subwoofer.
There's another section of the, it might even be on a completely different section about measuring vibrations that's not in the noise ordinance. It's in a separate part of the code, which is something we could probably, I think it's set aside from noise.
Whether the noise is continuous, cyclical.
No, there, let me just pull it up real quick. It's in the code. It's in, I think it's actually in a different section.
Yeah,
There is another area to address.
Let me look real quick.
something about smells and nuisance.
Yeah, 130 dash.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't get to read the whole thing.
I understand.
Yeah,
I just got it now.
yeah, so there's a section that talks about no person shall operate or cause to be operated any source of vibration which exceeds the limits set forth below. when measured. And that's, I think, a separate section different from the noise law
Okay, and
That's 130-7
in the current code.
in the current code, which is noise, odor, and incineration.
Yeah,
So we're talking about replacing chapter 130 with this new document. So we would be basically eliminating that.
oh, we would be, okay.
Can I see what that says?
Yeah, sure.
Oh,
Sorry.
no, it's-
I didn't know it actually deleted that essentially. 'cause
well, we didn't intentionally
Yeah,
do it.
okay, yeah.
We did it by,
It's not under the same.
It's not under the noise ordinance, but it is in
It's
the
not under
chapter,
noise-
in the chapter that
it's
we're
under
replacing.
chapter 1.
Yeah, it didn't come,
130.
not
We didn't go
coincide
far
with
enough.
unit, yeah. This section, vibration definition,
Which would be pertaining to low
should be
frequency.
renumbered, I believe.
Yeah, we would probably have to, can we renumber? Is it possible to renumber the existing?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I didn't have, this was not in what we were working on.
Because it's separate from noise,
But
yeah.
it's a good point you make because it's an error in that this should still be there, but these numbers now, things were added to these numbers, so they overlap.
May I make a suggestion?
Those numbers addressed.
We had talked about replacing the chapter. If we simply said that we're replacing Article 1, noise, and leave in Article 2, vibration, Article
Yeah.
3, toxic gases and vapors,
Right, is that we're not touching
4 and
it?
5,
Yeah.
then I think we're fine.
Yeah.
Then revisit.
I don't think.
And then we'll
vibration-
revisit vibrations in the future, because I think it is a good point to look at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
In fact, now that you mention it, I think that has been the major complaint, more so than noise, was
Well,
the
yeah, I mean, it was.
foundation shaking vibrations.
No, you know, in all honesty, when we first had an issue years ago, brought it to the attention of the board, the level, and met with Wayne Beal. Wayne actually came over to the house, brought some people with him, and did some test measurements, and he did address the issue, he satisfied it pretty well, so that's why, since that point, I don't want to put the guy out of business, I want to support it, it's a good business, I like him, I'm happy with the employees, all of that, but you don't want to open the door for his profit and my annoyance, that's unacceptable.
And specific things also with, I think it was mentioned last meeting and the last public hearing is, we do have a memorandum of understandings in
Yeah.
any way different than what's in here, and that's gonna be addressed separately too.
Well,
I'm sure we keep that in mind.
that'll be something that
replace
will be
this
an open
language.
view, or is that?
That's that
That'll be an
section
open
to do.
meeting, yeah.
Okay.
We looked at and talked about it.
This is your subsequent email with Luke.
That was, I think, the latest one.
That said, really, the Board of Trustees may, if it's in the public interest, on a case-by-case basis, grant partial or whole exemptions. I just don't think we need to give notice to all those people. I don't think that's substantive change there. It just makes it clear that the board can't grant a blanket exemption, but could grant a exemption for a specific activity.
So amending that to, if they are in the public interest,
Where are we now?
K. 130-4K.
Okay, yeah.
Just clarifying that a little bit.
Yep,
Know what the wording say? We're always
just
doing-
to, on a case-by-case basis, is that what we're?
Yeah,
Okay,
essentially.
yeah.
And add the word in that, if the board makes a finding that it's in the public interest.
Okay.
Stop talking. You keep adding stuff every time.
I know. All right.
Okay.
Robert?
Good evening. I have a couple questions, a couple comments. Section 130-4, subsection B.
B is in boy?
B is in boy.
Okay, I'm sure my ears are not good. Okay.
The way the sentence reads, activities of the village or volunteer fire companies and performance of their duties, etc. Does that mean activities of the village, comma, separate, or volunteer fire companies? It reads like activities of the village or volunteer fire companies, including village fire companies. Are those two separate entities? Does it mean activities of the village, comma, separate, or volunteer fire companies?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so I guess I have a comment on that. I would like to see this ordinance applied to the village in general, and that exemptions to it be subject to discussion by the board. I think in another section it said exemptions can be made. But I would rather see that happen on a case-by-case basis rather than a blanket granting of exemption. In terms of hours, my observation is that the village quiets down at 9 o'clock even on Friday and Saturday night. And if there are kids living within proximity to, say, the auditorium, I think the ending time should be 9 p.m. Obviously, if there's something special, the board can offer an exemption to that. But then we're going to have a lot of folks coming in here renting the auditorium, and if it's starting to happen on a more regular basis, I mean, I live close enough to it that would be a problem if that were a regular thing. And when I first moved here, it was like organ concerts sometimes on Sundays at 4. I didn't bargain for that level of noise that late on a regular basis, and there's people that live closer as well. So, for instance, if you have groups coming in with many people coming in for performances, and the music is going till 10, it's going to take them a while to clear out. That seems to be too late on a regular basis. I mean, if there's a special need for something, then they can apply to the board. I'd rather, keep it more restricted, and then people can always ask the board for an exemption.
The auditorium policy states that they have to be done by 10, not 9, 10.
But the board can certainly change that too. I mean, I just don't, I
Could,
don't want
but
to see
I'm
it.
saying that's what the policy has been for the auditorium, just telling.
Yes, and that can change too.
Okay.
So my concern is that as we're talking about ramping up on the auditorium, which is great, I love the fact that this is going to be used. But if it's going to be happening on a regular basis, this is a very tight-knit, community in terms of physicality. And I'm just concerned about the regular level of noise later.
A couple of thoughts on that. First, your first part, I think, was about, in general, the activities. B refers to activities of the village and performance of our duties, drills. C actually makes it clear that all village activities in village property must conform to the hours. So I don't think that that's really an issue, the fact that the village is blanket in the performance of their duties, drills, or public demonstrations.
So your reading of it is that the activities of the village will conform to this?
On C, clearly, I think the kinds of things you're most concerned about are C, although I understand you don't like the hour on Friday and Saturday. We'll get to that in a second, but C really refers to all these activities that go on, whether it's markets, things on public property.
Yeah, B would be more like snow plowing in the night,
Or
things like
Okay.
that. Things that like the essential activities of the village to maintain the roads.
I think the real issue you're getting to is the
Fight
time
fires.
on C, which is the activities that go on public areas.
The previous, I think the current noise ordinance says that, village sanctioned events are not going to be subject to
Right.
this. Is that
So
still?
this actually,
No.
this actually restricts it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
C
Thank you, I
is,
didn't
we
understand.
changed
Yeah.
it so that it's C. Now, that takes us to the hours, which is, there was no restriction before, mind you, there was none. So, we adopted the hours, which would restrict it, but as you say, it's 9, other nights it's 10. Now, if there is a concern about, and I think there have been a couple of maybe louder type concerts, rock,
Yeah.
we still have, it doesn't mean anyone going into, and my reading of it isn't that anyone who's going to use the auditorium automatically can go nonstop till 10, because they still have to sign a contract with the village. And if for any reason we're told, well, we're gonna have a loud rock band, it's something we could look at. We could give out a contract for that and say, you know, it's gonna be loud, you gotta end at 8 or 9.
And the daytime limit is still 70, so.
Right, right. So it's not like anybody in winter usually make a lot of noise in town. So I think you make a good point. We haven't had that much of an issue yet. There have been some, I've noticed myself, a couple of louder concerts. And sometimes it was part of, in my opinion, that we had one that was part of a big festival. One was for, I think, when we had one of our anniversaries, there was a loud group. To me, that's a community-wide activity, and it didn't bother me that it went later. But if we were gonna found we're having more and more concerts that were not the type that, you know, you originally saw when you came here with Oregon, or the violin, the woman that does the violin, or the nights where we have the sing-alongs, which are not hugely loud, you know, where the group gathers. I think we can look at that. I don't think we should change the timing just because that could become more of an issue ongoing, because we have control over what hours we sign a contract for a concert. And we can just, as policy say, you know.
How would you know?
We have somebody who is in charge of that.
Yeah.
We can discuss it further. Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think you raised a good point, but I would hate to limit everything just because of that. I think we
We
have,
discussed that before about
yeah,
the auditorium policy and the noise policy going hand in hand.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, there's another thing.
Okay.
It has to do with the fire siren. Given that it's been really great not having to be woken up in the middle of the night by that siren, I guess. And given that fire companies around the country are dispensing with this method, and given that there's only I think 2 or 3 people in the village who actually are a member of the volunteer corps, I gotta wonder what's the utility of waking everybody up, you know, every time that there's a call. Obviously, if there is a breakdown in let's say the notification, if that makes sense, I would like to keep it reserved for village-wide emergencies.
Okay, this is at least the 3rd time that this has been discussed, and I believe, my memory serves me correctly, last time Frank, there's Frank.
He wasn't here then, but yeah.
We were going to discuss, you had mentioned that circuitry or electronics was being put in where we could restrict.
Timer on it when it gets installed, so that if we do have a problem, we can also turn it off at certain times of the night. They haven't wired everything up yet, so we don't know if it's gonna work or
So
not.
discussions are ongoing with that.
So,
But also
My
we talked
understanding
that it
was-
was, you could not just make it to
Yeah.
village.
Right, my understanding is this is the way the system works, when you get information, you can't say.
Oh, you can't
if there's a
restrict
fire
it.
emergency in the village proper.
Oh, there's
There's
no-
no way to do that, but they were willing to try timing things so overnight it didn't ring.
No, that's not
and we
true.
only average about
I know.
50 calls a year
I
overnight.
investigated that.
So it's only roughly once a week
Yeah,
that we have an overnight call.
so we kind of agreed to do that by collegially working together.
See how it is, when it
This-
gets hooked back up again, and then we can go from there.
This law is separate from the discussions that we have with the sign.
Oh, I thought this
Well,
was,
It touches on the exemption, so.
But we agreed that we were gonna revisit that in the future, potentially,
Yes.
working with.
Yeah.
Work with the fire department and come to an agreement on that.
Then-
Many people could leave.
If anyone would like to see how irritating that is, come visit me sometime. It's horrendous. It has been for years, and they've done without it for how long now? Why can't they do without it?
As I said, we will be revisiting
Well,
that.
I just want to, New York Avenue really gets in front of it.
We did agree we'd look at that whole issue when the firehouse reopens, and we can come to any agreement we want together unrelated to this, but.
Any comments not about the fire siren?
Oh, it has something to do with fire. Fire department wants a siren, they're gonna save my house. Let them have whatever they want.
Daniel?
I previously submitted comments, I think that the board didn't get them, so I know that Kim certainly.
Good, Dan?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did, we actually talked about, were you at the last meeting? We discussed it, I didn't use your name, but we discussed it specifically I did get your comments, and
Get my comments back?
we talked about, in particular about, this is what I emailed about, I think, about the mill. You mentioned how if we
It's
have...
not just the mill, by the way, so I'll elaborate, but I'd love to hear what you.
Oh, well, just in that one issue
Yeah.
we discussed last time was, I think one of your comments was that you were concerned because the memorandum of understanding with the mill, if we change the village times or decibels, we couldn't be harsher on them. That could be an issue.
It could be an issue, especially in the future.
But I would mention that we discussed that with Tom, our lawyer, and I looked it up, and currently our MOU with the mill is more restrictive than our current law. And there's no problem having an MOU.
But now the board is taking the action to change the law for the entire village. Right? It's much different than negotiating an MOU when you have a problem and a resolution is joined to meet the problem. Now the board is taking an action to increase the decibels from 60 to 70 for Friday and Saturday night. And the mill is going to say, if not now, with the current MOU, when it's renegotiated, gee, there's other commercial establishments in the village. There are. There's Lake Ridge, there's Leeds. And by the way, they might be able to employ entertainment at 70 decibels at night unless you do something about it. Right? I think that's ill-advised to put into statute that which is deemed noxious for a commercial establishment to do. So if the village here is saying, hey, guys, it's not about the mill, it's not about Lake Ridge, not that that's ever going to be a problem, but it could be, all right? Not about Leeds, because we have a separate understanding. Well, these are commercial establishments, why would you put it in? It would be easy, in my opinion, to amend the proposal to exclude commercial establishments altogether from that, and to make them conform to at least the old 60, the old 60 decibels, again, that existed under a past law. Or maybe even something else, now that you mentioned it, it's deemed not received at 60, maybe even something else. But you could create a separate nighttime hour, for instance, for commercial establishment within X number of feet. So, yeah, and by the way, you're right, the current MOU, not so much. Like I said in my comments, problematic, but not so much. A future MOU, what leverage do you have? And this is a rhetorical question, I don't expect an answer, and that's okay. But what leverage do you have to bring the mill to the table and say, nah, it's 70 dB, guys. That's what you put in the law. That's what we're gonna do. And I don't know what 70 dB means, all right? I think the state maximum is like 80 or 75 or something like that, so we're getting close to the maximum. I do know that at the old level, all right, folks, I didn't mind the bunk level. I don't care.
They weren't meeting the old level, mind you.
Okay, all right. But at whatever way we go, that's why the village took action, thank goodness, right? But at 70 dB, I don't know what that does and what that means. And I don't know if the folks in Griffin's Ridge will lose their minds. You know, if in fact that's what's running Friday and Saturday night.
When it was 70, 75, I think when we were recording at the edge of their property,
Yep.
when we ran a test, we could virtually not even hear it at Griffin's Ridge. We tested over Griffin's Ridge. And when it was 75, let's say at the mill, it was 50, 55, all around Griffin's Ridge, the houses there. So,
Well, as you said, they were operating over the limit, so I mean, I heard.
oh yeah, because they weren't anywhere near what the village limits were, and they got fined many times, right? So they still need an MOU if they want to. They can't really have concerts there for a number of things that are in the MOU.
Okay, so do you know what this, I know that.
Right.
Do you know what the state limit is? 'Cause
I don't know. I don't know if there is. I don't know what the state limit is. I just know what all the villages around us are similar. Yeah.
Right. Okay, well, I didn't understand, and I don't think, and maybe I'm off base because maybe 70 dB is not, maybe it is. But if it's something, then I don't see why we would raise it for the commercial establishments that allow the public into the village. When in fact their stated intention is not to do that, right? To say, well, no, they, that was such a good MOU. So I don't think it would be a hard thing to write out.
I think the problem is that maybe the old limits were essentially non-enforceable completely because traffic, crickets
Talking about
chirping.
crickets?
Crickets chirping on Gary's porch. They easily go over the number.
My complaint.
And so the idea was to have a number that is actually enforceable at the border of a property that we can enforce, and it, you know, it's above a whisper, or, you know, because that's what and don't forget, 70 is the daytime number, so it is going down to 50 still, which was the old number at nighttime. So other than Friday and
Right, so I'm
Saturday, it's
talking
9 o'clock.
I'm just talking about 2 hours, right?
Yeah, right.
Saturday.
And also too, we did do the trial run, which was above and beyond the memorandum of understanding last summer, where we allowed
And beyond
the
this.
mill to break those limits up to 70 or 75 decibels as a trial to see what the noise would be at Griffin's Ridge and other areas nearby. And to Paul's point, it seemed like they were running a number around basically background noise.
Well, if that's within your knowledge, that's great, okay? It wasn't within mine.
I think
Yeah.
the problem goes more to what he's saying, when they have certain kinds of concerts maybe that have.
80, 90, 100 decibels.
Or
at the
have your
border.
electrification
Yeah.
where it's, which we don't really know about, where it's vibrational.
Yeah.
That could be where you're seeing more trouble.
And I believe the
than when
new,
it's a gentler concert that's,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, then you could listen to 70 dB as comforting. All right, but I will say one thing about bullfrogs and crickets and all that.
Yeah.
They're designed to be heard by
oh,
nature.
sure,
For
sure.
miles and miles. And if you take,
This is true.
if you take that bullfrog or that
Yes.
cricket and you just put it out continuously, you're
Yeah.
gonna have a problem with that.
I had one at the bottom of my yard for a number of years, and
Yeah.
I would agree with you. It was very difficult to sleep with the windows closed.
Tree frogs, oh my
Yes.
God. Yeah.
I think we want to point out that we have another control, which is the annual operating permit.
Right.
They've got to have one, so we get a
Oh,
chance
why
to
did you
close.
point that out?
Okay. There's another tool in the village's toolbox if there's difficulty at the mill, because the mill is obviously the one place where we have the greatest noise concerns at this time. And that is that in Chapter 91, the buildings that have an outdoor capacity of 50 more persons or 25 persons indoors, which are non-governmental, have to have the permit. They've acknowledged to us that they know they have to have the permit. They got to get it renewed every year. And if they're not doing what they're supposed to do, for example, having too many people within the building at the same time, our code enforcement officer is very sensitive to that. So that's a strong tool that we have, in
That's
addition
great.
to the noise law.
Right, but that permit, you would not be able to, I don't think not, to deny them from having 70 dB on Friday and Saturday.
Could you speak up?
I'm sorry, but you wouldn't be able to deny them from having 70 dB on Friday and Saturday up until 10, because that's what the law is, and it's good for everybody else. I don't know that without
Yes, that's
specific
correct.
discretion granted you.
We can make them toe the line with respect to our local law.
Right.
And if we have an MOU, they voluntarily limited their ability to produce noise. Beyond that, if they're in compliance, we can't use that to deny them an operating permit.
Unless you write in the line in this process, and you amend that section to provide that noise notwithstanding the decibels set forth for the general village for commercial establishments, that will be a consideration in continuing the permit or whatever. it is.
You're talking about the MOU?
No, I'm
Well, this
talking about that ordinance. I'm suggesting maybe that's a tool that you could enhance, all right, to deal with that. I said there were many ways to write that in the statute, that sounds like a good one.
That's not in the noise statute.
That is.
No, it's not.
Okay, so
It's not in the
we're
statute.
getting a
Something to
little
think
off
about.
topic.
Right.
Good point, right. And we were,
Chapter
and 130-4K, we are adding some wording,
It's page
Village-
3.
page 3. The village board of trustees may grant additional exemptions if they are in the public interest on a case-by-case basis.
Yep.
And right now, there's a similar provision, but it doesn't clarify that it's on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
So I don't see that as a substantive change, but a clarification. And therefore, we don't have to
Right, have
renotice
another
the public hearing.
meeting. Any other comments before we close this out?
Okay, I'll give you one more.
One more?
Just curious about this one, 130-5, C, motor vehicle and motorcycle.
Okay.
No person shall operate a motor vehicle in such a manner as to cause noise unrelated to the safe operation of the motor vehicle. Let me tell you, these things are noisy as hell.
Yeah,
Is this enforceable in any means or way?
we can't. It would be, have to be the sheriff or troopers or something.
Like sitting
No,
around.
I'm just curious why it's in here.
Or Peter standing with a
I can't
decibel
picture
meter
it.
next to a biker gang.
I mean, I'd love to see it happen. I remember when you used to have noise, muffle laws, they pull you over. I got pulled over many times. It gets a lot of muffles.
But if
But
there's
now,
someone-
there just doesn't seem to be any limit on them at all.
We have mentioned that when we met with Wayne, and he said, in the good weather, he says he has a bartenders try to
Oh,
encourage
yeah,
the
no,
patrons not to do
I
that.
believe, you can attempt, or you can tell your patrons, but that doesn't mean
Right.
anyone's going to adhere to it.
It's a problem at the mill at, like, could be 11 o'clock at night when
Yeah.
10, 15 motorcycles
Yeah.
decide to leave and they're gonna sit in the parking lot and rev
It's-
and rev and rev.
You know, it's like the speed limit, we rely on people to obey the speed limit. We can't have a sheriff on every street corner.
We have to obey.
Yes. Enforcement is difficult, right? You can have a sheriff come around for 15 minutes once a night and write 3 tickets, but the other 95% of the time we rely on people to, obey the speed limit, obey the laws. To a certain extent, you have to rely on people to be good people.
No, I
And
understand.
so, yeah, to your point, is it enforceable?
Yeah.
I mean, is the speed limit enforceable?
It's in there. That's the only reason I brought it up.
No,
Actually, it is enforceable if they're doing it in the parking lot. of the
Right,
mill.
right.
The mill is breaking
Right,
the noise.
right,
ordinance.
The
exactly.
mill is?
No, he's just saying,
It's
is it,
their property.
I think your point is would a cop ever give somebody a ticket for it?
Yeah, and that's even in this document.
Yeah, it just gives the cops a tool if there's a repeat offender, I think.
And when we were measuring noise near the mill, by far, way noisier than any music coming across the street was the revving of the motorcycle
Yeah, of course,
engines.
yeah.
And if that's a regular thing, they can be cited, and that can be part of why, they have to conform to things or have an MOU that's more strict than maybe the general rule.
An MOU can regulate the motorcycle?
No, I'm just saying, they claim they're trying to put signs up and asking people not to do that. If they're not, that could be one of the things they could be shut down over, I believe. So it forces him to try to come up with ways to be less intrusive.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I think it's good to have it in there. I mean, if you had a neighbor who just sat and played with his motorcycle all day,
Yeah, I was gonna do that.
I've had many motorcycles in my lifetime. I never had a reason to have to do that. If I let go, it would just sit idle. I was amazed you don't have to do that. So, yeah.
Any more? Last chance? Public hearing is closed, and the village board meeting for February 20th is open. And we're going to change the order a tiny bit. We're going to let Melody Putman, Manager of the Community Outreach and Development for NYSEG, our electric provider, do a little presentation, and then we'll have public comment in case people want to ask her any questions. Floor is yours.
Almost as long as you're. Okay, well, first of all, I thank you for allowing me to come and speak to the board and to concerned citizens, because obviously that's the reason why it was an inquiry to begin with. So, Assemblywoman Warner did reach out to me, I think back in January, if I recall. It's been a little busy these days, regarding some concerns that y'all have about the outages that have occurred last year and I believe the year before. I think it was 2 years. She had asked me to go back into our records and find out what type of outages, what the length of those outages were and so forth. So that's what I provided to her, and I believe she might have provided that to the board. So, looking back at here, if we look at 2017 and then 2018, there were 8 outages that we had listed for 2017 and 4 for 2018. Now, when we talk about these, we're talking large outages. And the way that our circuit is conformed to feed this area, it's more of a radial feed. And a radial feed means basically there's just one road and it's a dead-end road at the end. There's no connecting so we can loop it around for the main distribution. Now, there are areas where we can kind of backfeed. We can, and this is, I'm gonna get to this as far as what solutions we are looking to do. So even though it's a radial feed, there's not a connection at another transmission line. There's just one connection on National Grid line at the Luther Forest substation. That feeds this area. We can kind of backtrack a little bit from streets and kind of get around problems depending on where the issues are. But looking at the record, and again, there's what the cause of it was, and then also what the weather conditions were, since that does play a large part into what has caused the outage. And as you can tell, the first one on there back on March 1st was due to a traffic accident, I believe, where it damaged the pole, broke something on it, and we had to come out and fix the pole. I believe it was probably just a cross arm that might have cracked from the jolt of the hit. And I believe I might have provided some number of hours that they were out as well.
Yep.
Okay, good,
Now,
thank you.
where does these outages, what coverage area?
Well, again, they could be anywhere from basically town of Stillwater and then out. So, because what had happened, a few years back, you guys used to be fed by the Coons Crossing in Stillwater. When Luther Forest, which is the substation that's outside of Global Foundries, when that was put into service, we reconfigured, we upgraded the distribution line that fed this area up to a 34, it was I think a 12 kV line, we upgraded that to a 34.5 kV line. And we also rebalanced, so we put, you got the village in this area, the northern area of the mechanical division on that substation. So that's how you guys are fed now. Coons Crossing is, quite outdated and does not meet the needs of the area. So that's the reason why Luther Forest was also brought in. I don't know if y'all have driven by the Luther Forest substation. It's kind of on the back road. But right now, there's only one bank that feeds the area. And when I mean by bank, I mean there's a transformer that's inside the substation and a control house that kind of controls the power. But that's where we get our interconnection with National Grid, which they have the transmission line over to their substation, and then we tap off of that transmission line. So in this plan, we are looking at further upgrades to this area. We've got in fact, across all our territories in the state, and we have 13 divisions, we are looking at roughly around $2.5 billion we're going to be pouring into our system over probably the next 7 to 10 years. Some of the areas, in fact, they've been looking at, for the past, I'd say 9 months, we've been looking at the statistics of the circuits. What circuits need the most help or need the most upgrades, and what can wait a little longer. So we've been prioritizing what needs to be done. They're still in the process of finishing that fine detail as to what needs to be done on each circuit. So for future, we've already done the upgrade as far as the voltage, which helps with any type of capacity issues or any type of regulation, the voltage regulations, so you don't have brownouts and so forth. The next step is we will be installing what we call regular, reclosers. And they're called reclosers. So what that is basically, I think about it as a big breaker on the distribution line itself. So when there's a fault on the line, like a traffic accident, or a tree, or a limb, or a animal, right now, if it blows the line, the fuse falls out, and it knocks out the whole circuit, which is the reason why there are so many going on, because the outages that have been occurring may not be in this area. They may be down closer to the substation, and then it knocks out power everybody downstream. So what our plan is to look at each area that is critical and where we can backfeed, put a recloser in there that will be a SCADA, what we call a SCADA, which is basically an automatic recloser. So through the computer down in our control center, we can actually close that back in and create the circuit again and restore folks. If it opens up again, obviously we're going to need to find out what the cause of the problem is, but it will try to close, which will reduce the number of customers that are out, because we can backfeed easier, and it also reduce the duration of the outage. Those customers that are directly impacted by an outage, whether you have a tree on your line out by your road, unfortunately, this recloser system is not going to help you, because of the fact that we still have to take care of your fault in order to get everybody back on from you down the road. But if looking at the report, we're seeing a lot of trees outside of the right-of-way. Over the last few years, actually the last 5 years, we've gotten this part of the area on a 5-year trim cycle, which is our whole goal is to keep each circuit in our territories, which are thousands of circuits. There's probably close to 100 circuits just in this little mechanical division between Washington County, Saratoga, Rensselaer, and Columbia. Our goal is to try to keep the number of the tree trimming to a 5-year trim cycle with anything that's within the right-of-way. And that right-of-way is a 10-foot radius on a 10-foot clearance on the side of the lines, and then a 15-foot clearance above and below. So
You say 10, you mean 5 and 5, or 10 and 10, 20
10,
total?
10
Okay.
from the pole itself.
Right, 10 each
You go
way.
10 each
Gotcha.
way. And then that gives us the clearance to kind of reduce the number of outages. There are some towns that only have a 5-foot clearance. That doesn't help us one bit, because the fact if the wind blows, you've got a long bow, it's going to hit the line almost every single time. That's mostly downstate, so not the issue here. So we're trying to maintain that 10-foot clearance on each side, 15 above and 15 below. There is the last circuit here that feeds into this area is scheduled to be cleared this year. It's on our list to be done. Again, there's not too many trees left that are inside the right-of-way. The problem, as you can tell by the list, is outside the right-of-way. So if a landowner sees that there's a dead tree, they might want to think about taking it down or cutting it back.
Melody, we have seem to be served by 2 different circuits in the village.
Yes. Yes, you do.
One seems to be more reliable than the other.
Right, and that's part of the system that we're doing is there's actually 2 ways to feed you guys. Your main one is the Luther Forest. There is the Ray Litsky tap, which I don't believe is as reliable as the Luther Forest. I get the 2 mixed up.
No,
I think it's the other way around.
It's the other way around.
Yes,
Okay.
definitely the other way
I
around.
know one is and that's one of the issues that they are looking at. And again, as I said, they need to try to strategically place these reclosers that will make the most benefit for the towns. for that back feeding. So,
So I got your list here, and I looked through it, and I just did a quick search to kind of calibrate with what I have. And I counted at least 7 other occasions where the village has lost power that are not listed here.
okay. Do you have those dates?
Yeah.
And I'll take a look to find
Yep.
out, is it another circuit that I'm not aware of?
Sure.
Or is there another feed?
You ready?
Do you want to eat? Oh, okay.
I can give them to you if you'd like.
I
Or I could email them to you, whichever you
That's
prefer.
fine.
Which
I'm
is
here-
easiest?
That's here.
Take them down.
July 21st, 2018.
Wait a minute.
These might not be in order, so.
Okay, 7/21/18.
April 16th, 18. May 31st, 17. June 23rd, 18. March 8th, 18. And April 25th, 18.
Okay.
Those are the ones and then we've had 2 more this year. I know you probably didn't run 19, but we had January 5th and January 13th of 19 so far this year.
Yeah, I think that was I think one of those was a substation
Okay.
regulator that kind of may have
Okay.
frozen open.
All right. So I
Something
just,
causing the trip and it couldn't go back down.
it'd be
so-
interesting to see kind of,
And we've
why
had,
we have those listed as outages in the village and then why it's not coming up on your search, because
Okay.
be.
Again, I got this from line department, so.
Sure, I'm sure,
trying to figure out what's
yeah.
going on.
I'm sure there's a reason for it, but it'd be interesting to investigate.
so I think 2 other times this year, just so you know, besides the January 5th and 13th, we've had multiple people hop on our Facebook pages and say, "Does your
Brownouts.
lights just flash?" But they're very short, they're not long. We've had that multiple times. Sometimes it's long enough to reset your clocks, and that's what it adds. And we've had that, I think, twice this year already, besides the 2 big ones
Yeah.
that were
So,
multi-hour ones, those 2. Yeah.
right, so, and then I think one of them, the one that was this year, that one went for several hours.
Yeah.
Again,
Both
I
of
think-
these,
I think it was 6 or 7 hours.
the
Yeah.
5th and the 13th were multi-hour outages.
I'll find out.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, as far as the tree trimming, again, folks, if you see a tree that's on the property that is outside of the right of way, they might, cause landowners might wanna pay attention to that and kind of cut it down if they can, rather than let it fall down. So, with the trees that are dead, they're being pulled up by the roots when these big windstorms are coming through because of the fact that they're not, either shallow root system or they've just reached the end of their life and toppling over, so. The animal contacts, we see more in the spring when birds are getting ready to leave the nests. They kind of fall on our equipment. There was a couple of incidences, I think in 2017, where the ravens, there was a whole family of ravens decided to kill themselves by jumping onto the substation transformer. Their wingspans are pretty big, so they kind of made the phase-to-phase connection, and that was it. So, and then their siblings followed suit, and then the mother followed suit, so it was bad. It was really bad. Just kept on going. The squirrel contacts, again, we're trying to put as much animal controls wherever possible, especially if it's near trees where they tend to jump onto the transformer banks and make contact with their bushy tails. Other than that, there are instances where just the cold and rain will get into the equipment, and with the cold, it just expands and cracks the insulator. We see a lot of those. When we look at hardening our system, we look to see what causes the longest time to repair, which is putting a new pole in. So with these resiliency programs that we're instituting, and with the equipment, we're also looking at the poles. So we will be putting in beefier poles if it requires it, which basically will withstand more force. A pole, to replace a pole, is about 3 to 4 hours for just a regular one. When you get something that has a circuit that goes this way and a circuit goes that way, you got a whole bunch of junk on the pole, it takes hours, which I believe was the cause on September 6th, 2017. It took a little over 10 hours to repair. And, you know, again, it's one of those integral poles that we have out there that do take quite a lot longer to repair rather than just a cross arm or an insulator that's on a cross arm. We'd rather have those fail because it's quicker to fix. And then you get lightning strikes, you really can't do too much about them except for hope that the lightning arresters work and, or not work. Well, obviously they did work on the once. But there is going to be a lot of work coming down the line this year and next year. So these reclosers that we're talking about and the automatic switching, that is planned for this year and next year, because there's quite a lot in the division. So I will keep the mayor abreast so he can give you updates on what's happening when. Okay.
Does development improve the service? I mean, overall, as we see like sort of development to our north, I mean, if there's one circuit coming in, that's it basically, right? There's no way that like having more people or building out the grid benefits us. And
Not really.
No. Okay.
Only, you know, if there was another way we could tap National Grid, because they own all the transmission around here. The only transmission per se that we have are just the little tap sections that we, you know, go from our substation to their substation and their transmission.
You had mentioned about looping it back in and things like that, so I was wondering whether, you know, down the road, would there be an easier way to do that as population centers grow?
Anything is possible.
Okay.
So it's just a matter of where it's at, how much money it would be to do something like
Right.
that, and if National Grid would allow us to do that.
Right.
So that's the other thing, is National Grid has to worry about their customers as well. So if they've got all their capacity on their transmission spoken for, it kind of leaves us out in the dark. So we have to look for alternatives.
Okay.
So, again, anything and everything is on the table as far as distributed generation, solar, battery storage systems. It's all being looked at by different groups in our company, and our sister company in RG&E. So we've got some test programs going on around our service territory to see what works in what capacity. But in the meantime, what we can do is we can harden our system against Mother Nature and try to prevent, you know, the unknowns that we're not aware of. I mean, we can only do so much with storms, and hopefully the best thing that we know how to fight a storm is to make our system more hard.
Is this type of like the radial system that you're talking about, like a dead end system, is that common, uncommon,
Yes.
common?
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless you have a city where you can backfeed in other areas.
Okay.
And it's kind of like a spider web. You got to put that
Okay.
main line in, and then from there you can kind of work around. The grid, the electric grid is the same principle. It's the same principle. So you got to strategically place your substations. You got to strategically place those interconnection lines, those sub-transmission lines that are from 34.5 kV, 46, or 115 kV from substation to substation to make your web. And hopefully that web that you put in is sturdy enough to handle anything that comes its way.
I guess and I have no idea how any of this works. It's just I'm curious about how, as you know, obviously when you build out the system, the population is X amount of people, and then as development occurs and things like that, obviously you need to build out further. And I guess I don't know how those things interact. You know,
And that's when we try to, you know, we look depending on where the growth is
Where
there a
you
way that
put
we
new-
can loop it back?
Right.
And if so, then we can try to figure out another way to get
Okay.
to folks. So you know, it's something that's ongoing. You know, the new developments are all underground. So
Right.
in a sense, they're kind of in their own little loop. But, I mean, we can feed within that, but, you know, they're off the main line, so.
And just one more question: what kind of area do you cover as your?
I'm the east region, so my region is Plattsburgh,
Yeah.
which is the Canadian border,
Yeah,
Mechanicville, Oneonta, and then Liberty Division,
okay,
which is down to the Pennsylvania border.
All
So I cover basically everything from Oneida County, southern Oneida County, over to the east.
all right, thank you.
And I'll get back to you with these probably hopefully by either tomorrow or Friday,
Okay.
so we'll have.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Now, I noticed down by Coons Corners, there's a large solar farm.
Correct.
Who does that feed?
That, again, that feeds into the system. I think that's owned by Stewart's though.
Okay.
You know,
Anything else?
there was a couple, I'm sorry.
Nothing, sorry.
Oh.
Sidewalk's gone.
Yes, I think Stewart's built the main one. There's actually two sections there. One is the larger array. I think Stewart's did that one. Then there's a community solar that was trying to sell out the other portion of it. Since that's another company that owns that, NYSEG does not own that. I don't know all who owns it and what portion of it, but I believe that was geared to selling portions of it for those customers that didn't have the capability on their house or on their property. So typically our apartments, townhouses, where if a customer wants to invest and get their power, green power, they can sign contracts with these non-utility generating companies to provide them the power.
But it would go through you eventually?
They make it, or it's made through the solar powers and then uploaded, so to
Yeah.
speak, onto our grid, and then it just wheels from there.
Okay.
So it's kind of like hydro comes from Niagara
Yeah.
Falls, and the nuclear comes from Indian Point, and so, yes, sir.
In a community with a lot of subdivisions, the planning board is going to make sure that the owner of the subdivision grants easements for utilities. But we were developed, more or less, in the mid-1800s, and where would the authority to have a 20-foot wide easement and a depth easement come from? Is there some statutory authority?
There is actually genealogy of a company. I did not know it until I actually saw the documents. NYSEG is over 150 years old. We did start out as NYSEG in Ithaca. But through the years, NYSEG bought up small little private companies or municipalities when they decided not to have the system themselves. So they were bought up and brought underneath the NYSEG. A lot of those easements were from electricity was first invented and put out for the common area, which is the reason why you have a pocket here, and a pocket there, a pocket here. The deeds are quite interesting to read. Go to Bob's Road, go a mile, then go down south another mile, then go east another mile on Joe's Road. Okay, who's Joe? And there's the boundaries are basically, you have to look back at the tax maps back then of where the natural borders are and kind of work from there, because a lot of times, like the thruway, wasn't there when the system was set up. Clifton Park there was a village of Clifton Park. I didn't know there was a village of Clifton Park. Found it out when I was reading the documents though. So, that's where we have to look at. Those easements typically would start out from there, and then come forward. So, and whoever buys that company would take on that easement. So when we do subdivisions now, that's part of the right-of-way that is done from the very beginning is, we need to have an easement in order to put the stuff in the ground or put the street lights in or what have you. So, I think there was a question over here.
Yeah, about solar, I was wondering, perhaps at some point, we can have a presentation on what NYSEG is doing for renewables in general, but what sort of renewables individual residents can deploy, and how would that hook into the grid? It's fascinating reading about England, for instance, people are hooking their electric cars to the grid, and electric cars are being used as storage for the solar farms in the area, because it's the storage that's the problem with solar and wind.
Right.
I'm just wondering if you have, what kind of plans you have for the future? Those of us who would like to have more green energy, what can we do? What's NYSEG doing? I don't know, maybe we could do a separate presentation at some point.
Well, you bring up a very, very good point, and I think a lot of towns and villages and cities are struggling with that right now, because there's no laws right now on many of the books that pertain to solar power, wind power, and villages as such as yourself are having to create those laws. It has an impact on fire if you put a solar array on top of your house. Firemen and firefighters put holes in the roofs to vent, so that has an impact on how far over do you go with the solar power for the solar panels. What's the safety measures in them? From a utility company, we stay neutral because of the fact that we're not allowed to own, at this time, we're not allowed to own solar. The only thing that we own that's green is hydro. And that was part of deregulation. We sold off all our generation. We sold off the nuclear interest. And we basically have just a small footprint of hydro. We've got 5 hydro dams up in Plattsburgh. We have one down here on the Hudson River. So, we're regulated by the Public Service Commission as to what we can generate and what we can own. So when it comes to community solar, the best people to ask about that are NYSERDA. NYSERDA is New York State Energy Research Development Authority. They are dealing with all the green technology, and which includes the wind as well. So I think the battery storage, because it's still in its infancy, it's getting better. It's the efficiencies that is the key. And the price point. Right now, it's pretty expensive to put a solar battery system in, or a battery system in general, whether it comes from solar or wind. But that is something I think is going to be in the future, stay tuned. It's going to be jumping. It's already changed. The efficiencies have gone up on the solar panels quite a bit, and even with the wind turbines, they're even getting more efficient. So based on the pitching of the blade, you can get an extra 15% or 10% out of a windmill. That could be pretty big. If it's a 2 megawatt, you're looking at 200 kilowatt hour kW that you can get out of it. That's a nice sized business. That's a manufacturing business that you can feed off that just 10%. And if you do that for a whole farm, it's a changer. So, I think technology is going to continue to improve, just like furnaces did years ago when they had the oil furnaces. They were 30% efficient back in the early years, and then through the years they got a little bit more efficient, and now you're looking at 92 and 95 and 96% efficient oil and natural gas heat furnaces or boilers. So that's all has to do with the technology that's coming along. So, but as far as the solar arrays themselves, that's going to be up to the villages of what they allow, and what they can, what you can put in your zoning.
But you can't link up and sell electricity back to the grid.
Absolutely. Yeah, right now, those laws have not changed. Who knows what legislature and the PSC is gonna rule on, but right now, whatever you produce, and if you don't use it and it goes back up on the grid, there's a tally. It's a bidirectional meter that we have, and it records what is actually being produced and what is being consumed. So then it negates out in the month for residential customers, and then at the end of the year, if you have extra, it gets refunded back to you. If you're a commercial customer, that credit, if you have extra credit, just continues on. So.
Okay, any other comments for Melody or public comments for the board? Jose? No?
Thank you. This was good information.
Okay, and again,
Thank you.
I'll be talking to Gary, and hopefully I'll get you some information, more information on these dates.
Well, we're getting ice tonight, so we may be talking tomorrow.
Yeah, hopefully not, so knock on wood, we're doing okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so public comment for any other issues? Robert?
I wanted to talk about trees. April 27 is Arbor Day. And I talked to the board last year about this, and I think at that point, about the Parks Department and the Park Committee, and what the plan is for planting trees. I was told that there was going to be a plan put together. I don't know if that's been done, whether it's on the website.
It has not been done.
I'd like to advocate for that. I think that we're losing trees and we're not replacing them, and they take obviously a long time to grow. Also, we will be getting a donation of some seedlings, and I'd like to know who I should talk to, see if I can donate. We can donate some of those to the village, whether they would be of any use or not, to further that. But I'm very curious as to what progress has been made on this topic.
None.
That's unfortunate.
Except for, we had the plantings down on Kavanaugh now.
Yeah,
I'll
well,
have to check them again in the spring. And
a couple times last year I tried to get a meeting together to discuss this, and it just never happened. I couldn't agree on times, but I shall reignite that process.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Anyone else? Josette?
She's nervous.
My name is Joseph Snowden, and I have been a resident of the village for 70 years. I reside on the corner of Andrews Avenue and Bowman in the little Octagon house. My neighbor, Lisa Sandy, brought a big shed on their property. It's a big one, it's 12 by 12. And she put it right on the property line of my house and the right of way of the street. With that shed, I'm going to get all the water and run off the roof in my yard.
The shed's on the left.
This is your house? your
Yes.
house? This is a shed,
Yes.
and that's the roof going to her porch?
Correct.
Okay.
And you would put those three total pictures.
Hmm? Yeah, if it turns it bigger now. Oh, I see. Shut that through.
Okay.
Can you
Sheds.
send those pictures also to me?
Yeah.
I'll put them in the record.
And with the spring coming, it rains a lot, and then, as I grew them in the summer, we get thunderstorms, a lot more severe than we did before. I don't really have a big yard, and if I get a lot of water, I'm going to be swamped.
I don't know if you took a picture, but in the picture I didn't notice, maybe you can see, is there gutter?
There's no gutter.
There's no gutter there.
No, no.
I don't really know what the wall is. I know Peter would probably know what as far as putting sheds down and having clearance as far as drainage, as far as runoff. I don't know if it's
You
the
see
same
the
for
picture?
sheds.
That's the shed.
think the rule is, right, that there's a 12 by 12 doesn't require
A building.
a building permit.
Doesn't?
And
I mean,
there's
can they
kind
put
of a legal kind of gray area about where it sits on the property line, is that?
It is, I know that in Malta, you have to be 3 feet off the
Right.
property line.
And our code is not
We don't
specific about
specify
that.
If there was a permit required, it would have to be.
There was
It
not,
would
but there
go
was
to the
not.
planning
Yeah.
board, and the planning board would demand that we look at the water runoff from the shed.
Yeah, but with the 12 by 12, it didn't.
I got you.
Did you see them?
So you can put a 12 by 12 anywhere you want?
I'm not saying what is right or what isn't right, but I think the problem is that there is no current, it's almost like it's a gray area in terms of what the rule says. There's no setback requirements because it's not a reviewable property. I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong, I'm saying that that's what the law is, I think, if I understand correctly, that because it doesn't go to the, for a building permit, that it seems like it's something that should be looked at, let me put it from my personal opinion.
Of the
Yes,
shed until it was there.
yes,
I didn't,
because sheds are exempted under 12 by 12 from coming to Peter.
She also put a lot of fill
Yeah,
in the yard.
sure,
And now her yard is higher than mine.
sure.
And on top of that, she installed a swimming pool on the same lot.
Mhm.
Ground or above.
Literally only feet from the border of the property.
Yeah.
An in-ground pool.
And I now have a swimming pool, but then I have pool from the foundation of my house. And the pool is 3 feet from the property line.
The edge of the home.
the rule in the village is 2 feet for a swimming pool.
Is that right?
Yeah. Well, we don't specify.
I'm just curious, I can easily see from the picture that it looks to me like any work, I mean, our roof isn't gonna just be on her property, we're gonna be, go into her porch. But what about a pool? Are there issues? I just don't even know what there are.
Well,
Does it create a problem or?
Being a pool,
91 days.
right now it's still dirt, but she's going to pave around the pool. You don't leave dirt. And then I'm again going to have water problem with surface water if she paves around the pool.
All right. Unless somehow it goes into the pool, but.
I can refer this to the planning board to look at it, because the planning board would say that you can't have runoff onto your neighbor's property.
Right.
And I think that the village needs to look at a 3-foot setback, as Malta has,
Yep.
for sheds. Although in some properties, if there's no neighbor behind you, if you're, if you're
Right.
just.
Well, that's what the variance procedure's for.
Right.
And I just want to clarify that the fact that a building permit does not have to be obtained does not mean that a building does not, is not subject to the regulations in our zoning code. And I just want to.
What's the gatekeeper there, though? What, to make sure that people, if they don't need a building permit, why would they come in and say, well, I want to do this
Well,
and put this?
I think frankly, they should, but they're not required at this point. But if somebody makes a complaint, or if the code enforcement officer, recognizes that there's a violation, under the new international codes, he's required to enforce those. Minimum yard dimensions, the definition, minimum yard dimensions shall apply to accessory buildings, except for rear yards where accessory buildings less than 700 square feet and 12 feet in height may be placed within 6 feet of the rear lot line. So if we're 12 by 12, we're
144 square feet.
so we have a 6-foot setback, and it seems to me that, at least just looking where the fence has been placed, that that shed may be violating that setback requirement.
It's in a yard.
She tried to put a garage on that lot a few years back, and it was turned down because of the water problem that would have. And now this is going to happen again because of surface water since I'm road.
Yeah.
And it's going to come in my house.
It's a problem. I looked at it.
My house is 140 years old. And
This
the
would be something for the planning board to look at.
Right, I think,
strong.
So maybe to put it on the agenda for the next
It'll
planning.
be on the agenda for next month's planning board.
Yeah, I think
And I
that's a
think
good.
also we need to look at the lot coverage issue, because there are multiple buildings besides a single-family home on that lot. And that really needs to be calculated, and the code is, our code is specific that accessory buildings are included in the coverage requirements.
I think we need to do something to get people, if they're going to do that, to come in to meet with you, the inspector.
And the pool is also going to be a heating pool. So she's got a big heating unit sitting in the yard with a big tank. And I wonder what kind of noise all that is going to emit when it starts working. I have no idea.
Can I ask a question related to this, the whole issue? You can just go ahead and put a pool in your yard?
No, she got a building permit.
She got a building permit?
Yeah.
But is it like she doesn't meet the setbacks?
She does, on the
Oh,
pool.
she does?
It's
Yeah.
2 feet.
Okay.
It's a pretty small pool.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize.
so the pool, he said, doesn't meet the setback. The concern is once she puts the cement around it, the water's gonna run off onto her property.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, right, that can't.
But aren't there other issues regarding pools that, I mean, you're supposed to protect them, you get liability problems, you get insurance problems? you
Fence.
get-
She does, it is fenced.
It's fenced?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I haven't paid any attention to it, so.
It was put in by pros. I mean, it wasn't she didn't just hire some guy with a pickup truck. And I imagine they looked like they knew what they were doing, and this was pool number 728 they put in.
I think it is.
Yeah.
But I will,
Yeah, that's right.
it'll go to the planning board next month, and we'll look at all the runoff to make sure that there's no runoff that affects your property.
It is, I think, a good idea to look at
Josette, would it
something to do with.
be possible for us to walk on your front lawn to obtain some photographs of,
You can do anything you want.
okay,
You can see everything right from the street, though.
I'm wondering about that, where the motor is in proximity to the house.
Oh, for the heating unit?
Just keep an options open.
I'm sure it's more than 50 decibels on your property line when it's
Well,
running.
there's a noise thing, if it is, it could be enclosed. Then you wouldn't like the.
We don't want any more enclosures, so.
All right.
All right, any other comments? All righty, the superintendent is not here tonight. The crew is in the process of taking out the auditorium chairs on the wings of the auditorium. Takes about an hour per row. That's our estimate, yeah. Might get a little faster as they get better at doing it. We do have one of the sample replacement chairs over there if you want to ooh and ah. It's quite comfortable, I must say.
Wait, no. Do it, we'll take it. We got cushions. We got cushions.
No way. Memory foam, nice. All right.
Got you, so
Beautiful.
go do it, Tina.
Look at those.
I can't take the picture and record. Down in front.
There you go.
Thanks to Matt Holder and this.
Oh, no problem. Yep. Glad I found a good home.
Yes. They don't have your names on it?
It's the insulation from my cooler deliveries.
Oh, gee, they made them?
Inch and a half thick foam. Yep.
Oh, that's
Very
funny.
comfortable.
Did
Was it
John-
comfortable to you?
John, anything else?
Yeah. It was comfortable without the cushion, so I'm excited to see what it's like with the cushion.
We're gonna sit in style now.
They actually fit perfectly in these horrible.
Should they make good frisbees?
Will they automatically go up like that?
Yes.
I like that they just go up by themselves.
Yeah.
That's what I said.
For now, we'll see how they are in 100 years.
Won't be my problem.
Be sure to get back to us on that.
For the superintendent under animal control, we had a little cat scratch fever in the village. A Lake Ridge customer was scratched by a cat, and we couldn't locate the owners because they were on vacation. And
She was
we had an
quarantined for a
interesting
week.
time dealing with that, but all is well.
What was the result of that?
There was no frothing at the mouth anywhere, so it was good.
That's good, because that cat scratched me too. Oh,
The what?
that cat scratched me too.
Oh,
He has all the shots.
Was it a certain gray cat?
Gray
or-
cat.
and the cat will be vaccinated.
Yeah.
Chief,
We don't have any cats, but,
no Dalmatian.
you have my report.
We do.
39 calls last month, so we were busy still. We did move the trucks in yesterday. Peter gave us a little spot of the building, so we have trucks in here. Hopefully, by the end of next week, they're gonna complete, and then we'll have the whole building. It's mostly just finish work. I look upstairs today, but they got a lot of just finished stuff left to do.
There'll be an open house at some point.
Probably not until like June or so, because they got a lot of outside work to do
Mhm.
once winter decides to get over. So they're gonna complete the inside, they'll come back when everything gets better. They gotta pave still, they gotta do landscaping, they still have some more outside work to do on the building, and they're gonna do all that after winter leaves, so hopefully we'll get to that starting in April, and we should be raring to go, and we'll have an open house, we're thinking about June. We'll have an open house on a weekend, so, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Treasurer,
There's not a whole lot on the treasurer's report this month. I did give everybody the trial balance, so you can see the current budget. I put the unrestricted fund balance on there. Something to keep in mind when looking at that is that that's going to increase hopefully within a month. That'll go up about $124,000 when the CHIPS money comes in, so that's all right. I provided the spreadsheet for the charitable gifts withdrawals that we've been doing. There hasn't been any activity since the last meeting, so that's what you saw last month. And that's it. The abstract's really good.
all righty. Corliss? Nothing?
No.
Library? Nothing? Code enforcement officer?
We've just completed the MS4 report for DEC. It's just about done. Hopefully next week I'll have Gary take a look at it and sign off on it. And I just completed the Code and Energy report for Department of State that was electronically sent to them for 2018. We had 5 new building permits. 4 of them were for single-family homes, and 1 was for demolition for Johnson's house. And we issued 3 CLOs, one of them a temporary CLO for the firehouse, for the equipment bays, the locker room, bathroom, and radio room, so they can get in there.
Is that this past month you're talking about, or so far this year?
Well, so far this year.
want to explain what the MS4 is, because it sounds kind of ominous.
Yeah, each municipality has to fill out a stormwater report for the Department of Environmental, DEC. And it's a pain in the neck report that you have to do. And we get a lot of help from Blue Niles at Cornell that helps us fill out the, well, I fill it out, he takes a look at it, and then we send it in. That covers really all, it really looks at any kind of new development in the village. So we're really looking closely at Victoria Landing
And if there's a problem with MS4 compliance, DEC will come down hard on us, not the builder or the, who's ever causing the disturbance.
The fines are
We're the-
humongous, yeah.
Thank you, Peter. Auditorium? Veterans? Under old business, auditorium master plan.
Well, I can give an update on that. The proposals in response to RFP are due on Friday. A small group of people who will be reviewing them met last night to develop a rubric for evaluating them. Sort of thinking, I have no idea how many responses we'll get, but I'm thinking the interest we've seen that might be as many as 10, which is fantastic. Hopefully it'll be more than one. This group will meet again in about 2 weeks to compare notes and see what we think of the applicants, and we optimistically hope to have a recommendation to the board at the next meeting.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay. Thank you. Comprehensive plan, public meeting. I was thinking March 14th maybe for a public meeting to discuss it one last time before we. So March 14th, not a public hearing, just kind of a general informational hearing to
Is that a
discuss.
Wednesday or Thursday?
I don't know.
Thursday.
There was nothing scheduled in here on it, so.
What time do you want to do it?
6:30?
6:30? Matt?
I will not be available on March 14th.
Paul, you gonna be around?
You can Skype.
Checking that now, double checking, but I
Might be a little loud where I am.
It's already
Oh,
gonna be-
jeez. Is that night?
No, it's concerts.
Oh, pardon? Yeah.
Would it be,
No, everybody doesn't have to be here. I mean, just
No, but-
a few of us.
does it make any sense to have it like at 6 or something before the next March, our meeting?
I'd like to have it on
The same night, I'm
regular.
just asking,
It could be long.
yeah,
That's a lot, yeah.
It could be.
all right,
Because there's a lot of interest in like what's happening with New York Ave and,
Yeah.
I'm fine on the 14th.
Yeah, and again, everybody doesn't have to be there. So.
Right.
Let's see. What time are you thinking?
6:30.
6:30. And the water improvement, oh yeah, and all the materials are on the website, the comprehensive plan and the farmland, green infrastructure, farmland protection plan are on the website for your perusal. Water improvement project update, Mike sent his report, which I think I emailed around to you. It's pretty short. We've received comments on the Phase 1B archaeology field work report for the tank site that was submitted to SHPO, State Historic and Historic Preservation Office, in early January. SHPO has requested that an avoidance plan be prepared to protect the archaeological sites identified. Hudson Mohawk, our archaeologist, has indicated that this should be fairly straightforward and intends to guide us in this effort. This is expected to happen over the next few weeks. We prepared, the Water Committee met last Friday?
Yep.
Was it?
15th.
That's Denise, Matt, and I met with Mike on the 15th, and we went over a draft. We went over a draft letter that Mike wants to send to the Department of Health, and I've emailed you the short version and the long version. After meeting, there were some revisions that had to be made, so we'll send you the update and present that at the next board meeting. And did you want to say anything about that?
Nope.
Oh, and next Thursday, Mike Harrington and I will be meeting with the Malta supervisor and Craig Warner, town trustee, and their engineer to talk about options, the possibility of Round Lake supplying Maltaville with water, which was the 2011 recommendation from the Maltaville water study. So that's still, they had originally planned to get the water from Stillwater, but that plan hit some snags, so they're looking at lower cost options, and we might be one. So I will keep you apprised of that. And noise law, are we ready to adopt it?
Resolution? I'll resolve that we approve the noise law
As
update as
Is that
amended?
with the clarification that the
Yeah.
exemptions can be made on a case-by-case basis?
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
I thought that when they wrote it, that's what it was, but anyway, yes, with the adjusted wording.
And that is only sections what through what?
Section 1, right?
It's chapter 130,
Yeah.
and we're replacing Article 1, and we're not affecting any of the other articles.
I took the numbering of the other.
Second.
Discussion? Paul?
Yes.
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Yes. Under new business, we have a request for a fundraiser to help with defray medical expenses for a village resident. I would like to move to waive the auditorium fee for a fundraiser for a village resident to be held at an agreed upon date in the spring.
Second.
Discussion?
My only question was, someone raised the issue of if the building hasn't been reopened yet, is there any issues with
We just need to.
opening it or using it?
Yeah, we need to be aware of that, because there's a
Yeah.
big cleaning that
Yeah,
needs to happen at the
there's-
beginning.
Big clean and.
We do that normally, though.
Right, but it might have to be
Right,
pushed.
that's why it's
So
an
just-
agreed
So it just
upon
has to be
date.
coordinated.
Yes.
All right.
I trust we're going to use our usual contract. We'll just put 0 in for the cost, but all the other obligations that go along.
For a contract, is it just curious, does it have to be like $1? I don't know. In the movies it does.
No, so we
Waiving
can-
doesn't
We can
mean-
waive
I didn't
things
know,
when we
okay.
want.
Okay, $1 and other.
No, I'm just curious. I've
Another
seen movies where they have
consideration, the
that.
sufficiency and delivery of which is acknowledged. Got it.
Right.
So she's the one who brought it up to my attention.
Okay, we just need to.
So that's a yes.
Okay, so poll, did we poll?
We didn't pull.
No.
You
Yes.
seconded, yes. Ready?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Yes. And Malta Fire contract, we have reviewed that, and reviewed it, and reviewed it, and it is ready to go. So I just need a motion to authorize me to sign it.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Discussion? Poll?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And in your packet, you should have the newly designed ballot for the March 19th election.
Very exciting.
Hope somebody shows up to the Sherman.
Gotta worry about a write-in.
Got to worry about Duncan.
I mean, Duncan.
Oh, I thought it was a ring. I thought you were
Not a ring.
the diamond party or something.
Oh, what is it?
No, it's the Washington party. Taller there.
What is it?
All right.
I thought it was a bomb.
Mine is easy.
It's a Rorschach test. Tom thinks it's a bomb. I think it's a ring. Heidi thinks it's a hat. I don't
It says a
know.
bit
It's a lot of
before.
Freud in there.
It's
So
like one of those bombs you got on the computer in the old days when they crash.
yeah, right.
It's like a Christmas.
Mine is easy, sorry, but that's my name. It's okay, block party.
Yeah, it was
You're right.
always a stretch.
Well, actually, he had used it before. I had to fight Gary. He used it before I was on the
Really?
board.
I did.
So he,
All
and I went to
primary
do
driven
it, so he
block
already has it. He agreed. Yes.
I don't believe we have any correspondence. Approval of minutes.
Move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Discussion. Paul?
Yes.
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 Treasures.
Approval of abstract.
Oh, there it is.
There it is, right here, big
Abstract in the amount of $90,000, $749.74. Is that right? $90,749.74.
Yeah, there it is. Second.
Yep.
Discussion?
Yes.
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 Yes. Village attorney.
I do not have anything.
Village mayor. Oh, that's me. The New York Ave project, we are waiting for evidence for that Vamoco has clear title to access of the property from New York Ave prior to getting an appraisal. Have you heard anything since we last spoke?
I have not. I've asked for a written acknowledgement that the contract was extended beyond the end of the year between the homeowner and the company, and have not received anything.
Okay, so that's in limbo until we get any, get proof. Victorian street lighting, there's been some problems with some of the streetlights in Victoria Landing, and John, our DPW head, is going to tour them with an electrician from Amador, and they are going to try to figure out what the problem is. Scott and I met with a gentleman regarding renting the baseball field, and we tentatively come up with a contract amount of $1,000
Yeah. I think
in
that-
cash
yeah,
or
that exceed $1,000.
in-kind service.
Right.
So
State capital discipline.
he doesn't need that for this meeting, does he?
He does not. No,
Okay.
I still have to talk to Tom. We still have to get a
All right.
contract.
So that can wait.
I'll get together with the next week. Put it right to the next meeting.
I trust the in-kind service will be pre-approved by the village or the superintendent or you.
Yes. Yeah, we had some grandiose ideas, but a tour kind of quashed those ideas. And village trustees, Tom?
No.
No.
Ready?
No.
Public comment period? Nope. And I will move to enter executive session to discuss the appointment of certain persons for certain positions in the fire department and current litigation.
Stuck it in. Got it in there. What a difference in the gateway to the village, new fire.